So listen, I spent my weekend trying to stay away from AI generated stuff. I don't know why I just stayed off the computer. But it sounds like you've been digging into some stuff. What have you been up to?
Yeah, I didn't spend all weekend on the computer, but I did spend a
That's
chunk of
good.
change of time on Friday. Yeah, it was too nice outside to do that. I played golf actually. It was
Oh,
really
there you go.
nice to get outside, enjoy the weather. But on Friday, before I was done, with the day working, I spent a fair amount of time playing with this new tool that I had learned about.
Mm-hmm.
Called Warp. It's not actually new. It's been around for a while on Linux and Mac, but they
Okay.
just released it on Windows, and it's a terminal like shell complete package type of
Gotcha.
thing, but does a whole bunch of other stuff too that kind of modernizes it a little bit, but also keeps it in the command line interface feeling slash terminals feeling vibe. Explaining it, it just doesn't get it credit.
You
Like,
almost need to show it, yeah.
yeah, you definitely have to. I would say I'm going to show it for sure, but I think everybody should go play with it.
It was like how much better can this be than putty or what have you? You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
But you may be thinking, what does it have to do with AI? We're already getting off
Right.
track.
Right.
So it has an AI agent built into it. Cursor is what we were going to talk about today. And I wanted to have an app ready to go to see if Cursor can help me with that. But then I learned about Warp and I got sidetracked, as I do. Sonnet 3.7 also just recently came out
From Claude,
and
right?
from Claude, and also a companion app called Claude
Right.
Code, which is also terminal. It's more of a Python thing package, or I don't know if you'd call it a library. There's been a bunch of other things I wanted to play with. But long story short, I went ahead and spent some time with Terminal going through just the free tier to see how many like tokens it would let me play with and just see what it was doing. I recorded the whole process, so I thought we could step
Cool.
through that before we get into Cursor, because honestly, Warp was really fun. I'm looking forward to playing with it more, using it more, not just playing with it, but it seems very useful. So let me pull up a video of
Sure thing.
that first here, and then we can go
All
through
right.
that together. Okay, so if you want to share my screen here. Anyway, once you get Warp installed, if you're familiar with the Windows terminal, if you've ever used that, it's going to
Yep.
feel very similar to that. And so you can go back and forth between natural conversations or just like typing in commands. If you ask Claude what to do, it'll tell you what, command to run, and it'll even pre-populate it for you. So it gives you a little bit of heads up on stuff. I didn't really want to go that route first when I started playing with this. I wanted to dive right in with what can Claude 3.0, or sorry, 3.7 Sonnet build for me using this. And previously, I'd already been thinking about some ideas around just a very basic demo that can send some logs and metrics to Datadog that we can visually see on a dashboard in Datadog, just to show you how easy it is to
Right.
instrument something. And so that's what I aimed to do here, Warp. And I put that in there, and I'm not going to go through all, whatever this is, hour-long video. We don't have time for that. But you can see that after it thought through what it needed to do, it
Is this a
realized,
reasoning model? Yeah,
yeah,
that
I believe it is a reasoning model where it gives
right.
you what it thinks it needs to do. And then if it's a command that you need to run in the terminal, it comes up like this and then gives you the option to hit enter or
Right.
click on it to run it. And then it just throws that into the terminal and then executes it for you.
Very cool.
And so you just go through that process, especially when you're in a new environment like I am. I'm on this new Windows machine here, and so nothing's really set up at all. It goes through and decides what needs
Mm.
to be done, creating different directories based on what I asked it. And here you can see me just experimenting with the interface a little bit to see. One of the really cool things about Warp is this share block feature.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily the strong suit. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would agree.
So now you can actually like copy what and paste it just like it is to
That is
somebody
cool.
else, or share it with somebody else, I should say. It's not necessarily exactly
Right,
the
but it'll
same.
grab all
So
that white space, so it's not all jumbled when you go to paste it.
exactly. Yeah. So that's like one of those things of
Indeed. Why does a new terminal need to make this obvious? That's
yeah.
hilarious.
Okay, so over here on the right now, you can see where it's starting to create some code for me. It's creating
Right.
this index file. And before it actually creates anything, it always gives you this diff thing, or there's just new code. It's all green here like this. And you just hit apply changes or hit enter, and it starts creating that
Now,
file.
okay, where did it get the code color 632CA6?
Aha.
Because I know that code color, but not everyone's going to be aware of why
Yeah.
that's important.
For those of
Yeah,
you who
yeah,
don't know,
yeah.
that's the Datadog purple.
Exactly. Thank you.
And yes, so that's why it's actually done quite well there, I would say.
Gotcha.
So let's fast forward here a little bit. I think eventually I pull over. Oh, too
Look at
far.
that.
So here's the file, the index file that it created initially. Where'd that? Here we go. Pull up the app. Now, what I was trying to get it to do, if you read the text or the prompt, is I wanted to just drop my own JSON file in there that sort of
Right.
represents a log or a metric, and then put in my own API key, because that way it's easier for everybody to just drop their own key in and play with this. That turned out to be not a great implementation, or I guess approach to doing all this. To full transparency, I went down this route for a long time for the rest of this video. But then last night, I came back and decided to take another stab at it. But I went ahead
Another
and
swing
signed.
in the golf terms, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. But I went ahead and signed to unlock some more tokens. I'm not paying for anything. Yeah, it's just that I
Yep.
signed up. And so far, I haven't hit any limitations, but I did come up with a new approach, and I
Right.
actually got it working. So I'm not going to spend any more time going through that video, because I feel like everybody should just go dive into Warp and experience it for yourself,
Right.
because it is fun and it works pretty well. But coming back over to my screen, this app here is what I eventually built with Warp and Claude 3.7 Sonnet when I started over from scratch, and gave it a little bit more specifics on what I want to do, tried to reduce the scope on what was happening, and just make it more simple. So from this interface, you can choose a log or metric, and when you hit start streaming, it's actually going to start down here letting you know that something's happening, and sending data to Datadog. And I can see over here in Warp what's going on, the logs that are being pumped out and sent to my app. And this is a server or a Python, just like a proxy app that was built. One of the other things, well, I'm going to switch this over to metrics too and let that run more specifically, is I told it I want to use Next.
Gotcha. Yep.
And that made the whole thing a lot more just out of the box better. You know what I mean? Once I gave it those specifics, it actually, I thought, produced a pretty good app. So
I have noticed that Next.js and Tailwind do seem to be keywords. I don't know if it's like when the models were trained, and if it's like a cutoff date or something like that, but I wonder what the cutoff is for 3.7 and whether or not it's a little bit later than something else. Okay, so yeah, it's end of October 2024, which to me says that, yeah, for things like Tailwind, for example, it's going to be a lot more knowledgeable, but probably also of other frameworks as well. That's really
cool. So you can see it stopped here, and I've got this. One of the things in the new prompt that I gave it was to time out after 60 seconds. I didn't want somebody to take this demo and start it and forget it was running, and then just spam their Datadog account with a bunch. So anyway, I baked in a little failsafe there. But anyway, if we pop over into Datadog, we can see these are the metrics that were coming in. I don't know if you saw over here on the right. The code is just generating random numbers to send over. But then down here in the logs, we can see there's not a whole lot over here, but we can confirm this is coming from our app. The rest of it's all just generic stuff. There's the log message itself. A win, I would say, for an AI tool to help me build a really simple demo app that shows off some Datadog stuff, but
And I think last time you were asking me about sample prompts and things like that. I don't really have one for apps, but I will say I tend to go through the same kind of app as we were talking about Gradio, like a front end for an LLM or something like this simple type of app between them. And I feel like a good way is to see what frameworks they pick on their own, or when you give them one, how does it work with it, that kind of thing. So to me, at least, you get a good base to compare Cursor to at this point. I feel like it's massive. I'm just scratching the surface, but yeah, fair enough.
I flirted with maybe playing with it over the weekend, but then decided to just start from scratch and just experience it together. So I'm going to close Warp here.
Sounds good. I'm also interested because Cursor has a terminal which kind of does some of the stuff that I'm seeing in Warp, but also does not do some of the things that I see Warp can do. And I wonder if, because it can consume shells at least, maybe not terminals, but shells themselves. And I wonder if there's a way it can work with it. It would be cool to see.
Excellent. It's immediately asking me about my keyboard setup and key bindings.
Now, are you Vim or Emacs? Where do you stand?
The great debate.
Indeed.
I'm between Vim and Emacs. I am certainly more Vim.
Fair enough.
But to be honest, VS Code is home for me.
It's and it's for a lot of people these days, yeah. I thought this was interesting because to me, the fact that it included Atom and Sublime was cool. As somebody who used to like both of
I
those
know,
a lot,
right?
and unfortunately I haven't used them in years, but yeah, I was a big fan. I
Yeah, yeah.
also found the fact that Vim and Emacs were the first was maybe indicative of who they're trying to win over in terms of hearts and minds.
Right. Yeah. So, but I'm going to stick with VS Code just
Hmm.
because that feels right for me. Okay.
Now,
Language for AI. That's interesting. That's funny that you have that story because just this morning I was doing some research using Perplexity,
hmm
confirming or looking up some additional stuff for a talk I'm about to give. And Perplexity has this new advanced research thing. So it started stepping through all of its stuff, and eventually it got to a source that I believe was in Spanish or Portuguese. And then the reasoning and all the text output switched to that
yes,
language,
swap
the
your
rest of it.
Portuguese.
Yeah.
It's
I never said to change or anything. It changed based on the source, which was weird. Anyway, code base byte. I guess I'll leave that enabled.
Yeah, my understanding is this is if you've only got one file open in something like a mono repo, it might be interesting to not want to look at the entire code base. But in my case, it's not a big deal. I've just left it enabled.
Yeah. Okay.
And then
And
I installed both of these, but I never used them, so I'm not sure if they're key or not. They do pop up a couple of permission things. Yeah, I
okay.
figure they might on Windows as well. And the
Well,
same thing for cursor.
let's
I
go
think it's
ahead.
just so you can one of them so you can open the browser. The other one's because it's got a little terminal tool that again I've not used. Okay, now this is
Oh,
another
okay.
one. One of the first ones I think is pallettes when dealing with Python. And I think there's one for JS as well that it uses making sure that it's running tests as it goes through.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this might pop you into another window, but I'm
Let's see
happy
what happens. Okay.
to waste some time while you're doing that.
It did. That's all
Okay,
right. How about we'll switch to my camera and
there we go.
I'll set up an account.
Sure thing. And the thing that just while you're doing this, I noticed, and you were talking about the free tier and Warp or not signing up and signing in. As much as I love Cursor and I have paid for it, prior to paying for it, I did run out of credits on that free account, and I ended up just signing up with two other email addresses because I got a few. I felt bad, I got to be honest, because I know that they're paying for whatever this is on the back end, that they're just trying to get you in. But once you get on a roll, and you probably felt this was Warp, is you're just like, just one more thing. It's just one more turn. Just this next one will fix this tiny little bug. But you're so close to having a fully fledged app that it feels if you're telling your assistant or your temp or somebody who's coming in with your code. And I just kept going, and I would spend like, I don't know, 12 hours, 14 hours and stuff. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the sign up thing is interesting to me in terms of the way that they bring on people. Like they're trying to get people in for free, basically, to show them the utility. And if we're going to think about, what is it called, proof of value, if we're going to think of that kind of term, it felt to me like there was value immediately, but it took a little while for me to prove it.
Sounds like your experience was very similar to mine with
Fair enough.
Warp.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we can switch over here to my right screen now.
Perfect.
So I did go ahead and just sign up with my Google account, and that took me to this screen. And now we're into what oddly looks like VS Code. Now, I wouldn't say oddly. I think that's intentional because it's basically VS Code in terms
Yeah,
of the back, like
I don't even know if
Electron,
fork
right?
is like the right term for this.
Oh, cool. So before we hit record, we talked about what should we do here? Should we start from scratch or actually show it some code and see what it thinks from that? I'm in the camp of let's show it the code that the other one created.
I might agree, actually. I feel like the ergonomics of setting up a new project are going to be the same with the same language model backend. I think in Warp as in Cursor, the difference is it's got a couple different ways of doing it. One is, I think it's called Composer, and the other one is Chat. I guess there's three. And the third is as you're typing your text out. So there's a different experiences. It might be a little bit different than Warp, but in terms of creating a piece of software, I think it'd be roughly the same.
So we should open a project and just point it at or go into our, let's see, to dev and then streaming app. So this is the app that Warp helped me create.
Right on. And you'll see that there's a welcome on the top left. It just wants to make sure that you understand all the different modes. One is as you're typing. The next is to tell it to fix your code for you. The one after that I got a ton of value out of is just asking questions of your code. And then the last is chatting with your code base, which is where I spend most of my time. It's actually just asking questions of the code base. Is there a better way to do this? Is there some algorithm that I've forgotten? Or do I really need a while loop here? That kind of
Right.
stuff is really handy for me as somebody who can code but doesn't do it all the time.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, they want you to onboard properly, I think is what they're saying.
Okay. We don't want to read the change log right now. Where do you suggest we go from here?
I would start a git ignore just to see how well Warp did with that, because this can be one of those things. Because I see you've got an env file, and I don't want you to touch that.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if it's ignoring the env file in the git ignore, because this is one of those things that Cursor can do, but doesn't always do properly. Okay,
So
there
hold
we go.
on. No,
Did you do this on
no,
your own though?
yeah, I did this. No code has
Fair enough.
been changed. This is
Fair
all
enough.
me. This is this server. Oh, I see what's happening.
Yeah.
Go.
I like this, but also I understand in Visual Studio Code, this is similar. I find
Mm-hmm.
it a little bit annoying when I've already got something that can handle Python and it's asking me for something else.
Mm-hmm.
Not the end of the world, but I think VS Code does that as well.
Yeah, I think it's best to just have maintain sort of the experience across
Yeah,
everything.
agreed.
Anyway, that's why you chose. Okay, so that should be good to go for now. I'm sure we'll get more of those.
And I think you can just click on that extension thing or the file manager there on the top left. Yeah, and then back to server.
All right, so yeah, I don't know that we have to necessarily examine this real close, but this is definitely untouched since being created with.
So a couple of things in here that I'll say, just because I know Datadog is like the logs and metrics endpoint, like the intake endpoints can change.
Mm-hmm. You just reminded me of something that I want to point out. One thing it got wrong that I did not catch for the longest time is
Right.
that in my env file, which I can't show you because it'll show my keys, but the name of that secret is dd underscore API underscore key,
Yep.
right? And I think so right here. However, somewhere in the code, it was Datadog underscore API key.
I've had the exact same problem with Cursor, where it creates multiple variables that do exactly the same thing and uses them interchangeably through your code.
Really, what I'm embarrassed is that I fed all the errors. I kept feeding the errors back into Warp, and it never even hinted or suggested that as a possible cause of why
Right.
we were getting 404 errors, I think, or 403 errors at the time. Anyway, it was just, that was a huge opportunity for detecting what in the world is this not, why is it not working?
I wonder though if this is a good friction log for us, because I bet you somewhere in our docs that it says Datadog API key and then it says DD API key, because I've seen both before in our docs. I wonder if it's ingested old versions of the docs and it's got some of that stuff in the memory, as well as the newer stuff, and then it's doing two things at the same time.
Yeah.
It feels like at this stage in 2025, the current year, that it looks like adjusting your documentation for AI use seems to be important, which is odd to me, but it does seem critical. Especially in, I'm not sure if you've done it in Cursor yet, but you can add documentation, and depending on the form of the documentation, you'll have more or less success, basically.
I did see in a video
Yep.
that you can add docs as like a source. You were, I think, suggesting that we ask it to make sense of this code. Is that what your first suggestion was, or what?
PEP 8 is the standard, I think. It is, in fact. So PEP 8 is the style guide. Basically, so it's one of these earlier tickets from Python that will tell you basically that your project should look a certain way. Now, one thing that I will often do is grab my Python code and say, okay, does this comply to PEP 8? So PEP 8 is what it is. And it means, did you hit enter after your function, that kind of stuff, twice as opposed to once? So there's enough space there, because white space is important to Python for legibility. And again, not that this code is bad, I just wonder, looking at it, if there'd be a PEP 8 way to handle this file. And I think, at least on Mac, what it would generally do is use pallettes to go through that stuff. But I wonder what Cursor will do on Windows to see if it's compliant with PEP 8, basically.
Okay. How do we put it through the ringer? Find
So
out.
I think what you can do here is, normally you'd select it all and then start a chat. If you hit on the top right there, there's a little sidebar button just to the left of that one there.
Toggle AI pane.
I
Okay.
didn't know it was called AI pane. Composer is pretty handy when you want to update your code seamlessly.
Okay.
But the nice thing here is that you didn't need to control or Command A that entire file to put into context. It knows already that the context, you can see on that first line there, is server.py. So it's got all of this in its context when you're talking to it. Now, on the model that you've got there, I wonder, are you able to pick 3.7? I'm not sure if I've seen it yet. Oh, and there is a thinking. Okay, there we go. This makes a lot more sense. Gotcha. And then I just say, hey, is this file like PEP 8 compliant?
Okay. So is this file, is it just pip like that? PEP.
And then 8, the number 8.
Okay.
There
And
you go.
then compliant.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing. But yeah, does it conform to Pepe? Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay.
And then yeah, you just hit I think it's Control Enter or just what I like
Okay.
about this is a lot of that little the ergonomics of just doing this kind of stuff is very easy. It doesn't take a lot of work. Interesting
Womp,
Anthropic's too busy.
womp,
It's going pretty
womp.
good. That is a good failure though. I've yet to see this happen, but I wonder if 3.7 is pretty popular.
Yeah, let's do. Let's try one more time, and then we'll maybe
It did pretty good though. It did
do some
say that hey,
different.
there were some blank lines that you need to remove. There were some that you need to add, which is pretty cool. Overall, it's pretty
Okay.
good, but not there.
Past the finish line this time. Cool.
Okay, that's where what I was hoping you would get to as well is that there are different packages that you can use that aren't part of VS Code that may or may not be installed that it can leverage when it's testing. And Pylint is the one that I was using, but it can do things like run Pylint on your code on
Yeah.
its own, which is like pretty amazing. Now up here you can apply this
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
and
do next. Oh,
and see how you can do it like incrementally. You can do like little portions of it as well if you don't want to do the entire file, which is handy
yeah,
because
we'll just do.
sometimes it will mess up little pieces of code. And then you can see it looks pretty well the same, and it's probably just added like space here and there kind of thing because Pepe is rather specific.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah,
But you don't get a diff or anything that tells you what.
you do. Yeah, if you scroll down, I think in that same window where you applied, you could actually do a diff, was my understanding.
see.
But maybe that's in Composer mode. Maybe because it's already in. It might be a Composer thing, but Composer will give you a diff, and it would be in that same little drop down there, which is
Okay.
pretty handy. Run and say yes to all. Imagine if you're doing like a yum install or an apt upgrade kind of thing. Just YOLO made basically. Just say yes to everything. Just do it. Like continue until it runs is a good one. That prompt that you had in the beginning in that you were defining how the app should work. It looks like when I'm working with Cursor, the better way to do it is to define tests that should pass. A user should be able to open a web page, type in their API key, hit submit, and see that the logs are there. Would be like very similar to what you're saying, but phrasing it like a test, and it can continue through that until that is true, which is pretty interesting.
There's another file that's part of this, the
Let's do
interface.
it.
I was gonna just see if should we stick with. Let's see what the reasoning model does. What we could ask it
It's
is
different
there
types of
anything we
color
can do to
blindness.
make this more accessible?
There we go. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, anything that can be done to make this app interface more accessible without changing the primary color. I forget the color hex, so we're just going to hope that it can figure out purple.
I just know it starts with 632. I didn't know the rest of it.
Oh, yeah. I know it when I see it at this point.
Right.
Let's just go with this. I'm not going to give
Yeah.
a lot more specifics. I thought about just saying, not only is there anything, but go ahead and do it, right? Don't even ask it like a question about the error. And it, it's not a bad presumption that I'd like to get to the bottom of this error, but
This is 3 weeks of meetings right here. Even just
sure.
having a proposal is very handy for this type of problem.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. Unsurprisingly, it found a lot.
I'm actually surprised because it's a very simple app. But yeah, there is a lot in here.
I think there are a lot of things that we can do to make things more accessible with the fonts and the colors and the spacing. And the question is, yeah, okay, we got the apply all. So so let me.
Okay, so from here, you can start the terminal because it's got a terminal that's similar but not the same as Warp because it has some AI stuff in here as well.
Oh, wait, we don't want to be in PowerShell though.
In the chat, you could actually say, hey, how do I start my app? And it can tell you, and you can run it from there.
Okay, so just how do I start my app?
Yeah, and I wonder because one of the things that I noticed in Warp that it did was allow you to click on stuff to have it start. Ah, look at that. Pip install. We don't have a requirements.txt, which is a good call out because there are some imports at the start of the file there. But it says we can just do Python server py. If you mouse over that, are you able to click it into the terminal?
Oh.
Yeah. It starts a new terminal, that's all right.
That's fine. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's what I expected it to look like. And then if we come over here and refresh, I think, yeah, so our app is working. All right. So this is before, and then can we get back?
Just scroll up.
Why? Okay.
Massive mess. 1 of 10 changes. And it feels like to me I want to split that terminal out I haven't tried that yet, but I do a lot in the terminal. So for me, it's mostly the editor, the terminal, and the chat interface, and it feels like I want those to almost be windows on their own.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I have the same problem in VS Code too.
Now, does it need to reload, or is it hot reloading?
I am checking. It doesn't look really any
Because I didn't
different.
even know hot reloading was a thing. Full disclosure, until I started playing around with JavaScript, it was a bit of an aha moment for me. The fact that you could just have the website update as you're editing your code. You probably need to
Terminal
restart
back up.
it. Yeah.
Let's just kill it and run it again.
Awesome. You can actually grab errors from this console and add them as context to the chat as well, which is pretty nice.
Oh, neat.
Yeah. Super handy.
All right, let's bring this back and
let's see what it changed. Okay, so it looks the same. I wonder if loading in a different browser window would change it. But looking the same is a good thing.
I don't recall this purple
It did say it was changing the highlight, yeah.
So that's cool. Let's start sending some metrics over. Definitely nothing extreme.
Which is cool.
Let's go back to the last 5 minutes or so. And yep, still works. And it's somehow more accessible.
Should not be used in production. Ah, interesting. I didn't know that. They don't want you using their CDN in prod. That's not a bad call.
Yeah, I feel like that's a success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being able to just say, here's my code, make it better. Didn't break anything.
Now, there are a number of editors out there like this. And I think the only thing that came to mind when you were talking about Warp, and I didn't want to put this in your brain, but it feels like to me Warp is something that is, if there is a Venn diagram of editing, it feels like the terminal's part of the editor now. So like Warp would be part of Cursor, which is part of something that uses Sonnet or other large language models, but can also use your docs, that kind of stuff. But it feels like the editors, what is it, the Emacs OS kind of thing? Like it's trying to become that entire all singing, all dancing, like start here, don't go anywhere else. Cursor's not there yet. Cursor's not that editor that's like the Emacs operating system yet, but it's awfully close. Like at this point in time, if Cursor could run a VM and click on stuff, I would be very interested, and it feels like the next step. Like we're almost there.
And it doesn't feel like it's really that far, or that it needs to be that far behind.
They're very fast and updating and adding new stuff. 3.7 was in there, for example, and that's brand new.
Oh, yeah. And if it's always, really going to be closely representing what the latest and greatest that VS Code offers,
right?
They're also just piggybacking on great velocity with that.
Because they've changed the way that Copilot works in VS Code as well, which is similar to this now.
I've been using VS Code, not a ton, but up until the Warp terminal, I've been using it for pretty much everything. But I've been deliberately avoiding the new GitHub Copilot button and logo and everything because I wanted to save it for a deeper dive.
Gotcha.
So I know it's there. I have clicked on it just to see how it would rearrange my screen. But then turned it off because I was like, I'm going to go back.
The feedback I get from people about VS Code in terms of negative is that it's slow or slower than they expect. And some of it's down to you get 30 extensions installed. When you turn it on, it's going to check for updates. Some people don't want any AI agent touching their code, that kind of thing. So for them, it's chat window only, please. Don't mess with my stuff. Don't be in my terminal. Or rather, all of that is separate. Some people want it to be part of the whole app. And I think Cursor's claim to fame on YouTube might be like, I made a full app in 5 minutes. So I've heard other people playing with Windsurf is one. JetBrains has its own kind of AI stuff. So does Vim. So does the Emacs now. So people are trying to use that as well. And then VS Code itself is changing a little bit. So it's the space.
Bolt, right?
And there's Bolt as well. Yeah, the space is changing quite a bit. There's Replit as well, which is a little bit different. Yeah, we're pretty close to time here.
We have a hard stop, so we do need to wrap this one up. Go play with the Warp terminal because I want to talk to other people about it because it's just I love it.
You get 3.7 credits for free.
I need to spend more time with Cursor, but I like it so far. It feels very comfortable. It feels just like VS Code, obviously. It does. It seems to be does a lot of the same stuff that I just demonstrated you can do over in Warp. So the experience is comfortable already. I know how to have that conversation. So I just need to come up with some more time and some projects to play with.
For me, the thing that I like the most is docs. Is when I'm doing this stuff, it's like a mini rag. Add the docs for the thing I'm dealing with that I don't understand into this because I'm lost.
That would have saved me like an hour, I think,
Oh,
with
okay.
warp
Okay.
because of what I told you. It was just wrong. It got something wrong out of the docs, and I
You just kept
assumed
going.
that I just didn't even look that close. I
Yeah.
want to wait until it doesn't work, and then I have to get my eyes on it. I don't want to be there from the beginning of the code. I just want to help you troubleshoot. Let's get through this together. Anyway, so yeah, that was my experience, and I think if I could have said, "Here's the Datadog docs. Here's the source of
Right.
truth," at the beginning, I think we could have avoided me being down this path that I spent an hour.
I find I learned so much about our product just by adding the docs into Cursor that it seems silly, but it's like we have new docs every day, every week, every month, and I'm always falling behind. So it's awesome for me to be able to have the current source of truth as I'm playing around with stuff.
Yeah. All right. We should probably wrap it up there. So for those of you watching, I hope this has been helpful, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye bye.
Bye.